been a most extraordinary night in Tripoli. Hundreds of Libyan rebels have swept into the country's capital. People have swept onto the streets to join them in jubilation, in celebration of their arrival and the apparent downfall of the Gaddafi regime. Gunfire of celebration on the streets of Tripoli, not of defiance by the Gaddafi regime and those forces loyal to him. Indeed, there seems to have been very little resistance. The International Criminal Court has confirmed that rebel fighters have captured his son, Saif al-Islam. There are also unconfirmed reports that the Libyan leader's presidential guards have surrendered. It is uncertain at the moment, though, where Muammar Gaddafi himself is. Several reports placing him in all sorts of places, from the Algerian border to the centre of Tripoli to a hospital. Nabila Ramdani is a journalist specialising in North Africa who's interviewed both the colonel himself and his son, Saif al-Islam. Good morning, Nabila.
Hello, good morning.
Lots of uncertainty at the moment, but how sure are you that what we're seeing at the moment in Tripoli represents the end of the Gaddafi regime?
Well, it clearly has been a momentous night for the history of Libya, and as you said earlier, interestingly, there hasn't been an awful lot of resistance from the Gaddafi regime, when a few hours ago only everybody feared a bloodbath in Tripoli and a bitter fight between the rebel forces and the Gaddafi loyalists. There are still pockets of resistance and ongoing battles in certain areas of the city. And Gaddafi himself has still not surrendered, so effectively he's still in power, even though he's become a bit irrelevant, it has to be said. So we've seen effectively rebel forces reach the Green Square quite easily, which they've already renamed Martyr Square, and scenes of rejoicing have dominated the night, and it's clearly another triumph of the Arab Spring, in my opinion.
Knowing what you know of Colonel Gaddafi, having interviewed him, how would you see him facing the end of his regime, fleeing or sitting in the centre of Tripoli to fight a last stand?
It's very hard to speculate. Clearly, this is a man who, spent most of his years in power as a pariah on the international stage, and this recent conflict has put him straight back into that position, defiant, hard man, defying the West effectively. And he's also said repeatedly that he will never leave his country, that he will die in Libya. So it's very hard to say that, if he'll stick to that. Remember, this is a man who doesn't have many friends in the region and nowhere to go to effectively. So his options are very, very limited.
The important thing really is what happens after Gaddafi, isn't it? And what does happen next?
In my opinion, the prospect for the future of Libya is looking pretty daunting. I think the immediate concern will be the management of security and policing, basically the re-establishment of law and order, and also there's a real danger of seeing the kind of Somalia-style civil war between different factions. When you have a conflict, you get a build-up of grievances, a desire for revenge. There are even rivalries on the side of the people fighting Gaddafi. Libya is a country where you have entrenched tribal rivalries, regional rivalries, and we have seen people vying over the control of resources already, and between people fighting who say that they fought against Gaddafi more and therefore should be in charge. And after all, Libya is a relatively recent creation and not necessarily a natural unit, so there is a real danger to see a split within the country.
There is, though, a government in waiting, isn't there? That they're already manning embassies and have some sort of a structure. So in that regard, at least, isn't Libya better off than some of the other countries who've seen regimes overhauled during the Arab Spring?
Well, I think the National Transitional Council is clearly a divided group. and also it lacks a political vision on the long term for Libya. Security experts have already expressed concern as to the inability for the TNC to implement its vision for Libya. And there has been, throughout the conflict, a clear discrepancy between the leadership of the National Transitional Council and the rebel forces on the ground. So I'm afraid it doesn't seem that there is in place a proper unified entity able to lead Libya towards, democracy.
Many thanks, Nabila Ramdani, who is a journalist specialising in North Africa.